Yeah, I think it's.
Mm-hmm.
So hello, Ian.
Hello, Roberto.
We are now going to do a very banal interview. I hope it will be banal because people deserve
Banality.
banality.
Yes.
And I even I'm afraid that there could be possibly a secret police we know little about.
Yes.
With special anti-banality forces. So actually they look for banality offenders, people who offend banalities.
It would be good if there were real banality, please. Because the world would become more interesting, original. And,
I'm afraid you didn't understand. There would be anti-banality.
Oh, anti-banality.
Yeah, so actually they were looking for banality offenders, people who offend
Oh,
banality with complex things.
Yeah, in order to enforce banality.
Yes, because it's not democratic. That people are not allowed to understand something.
Yeah, well, ask me a banal question.
So I will ask I will start with the most banal question, which actually exists, which is your star sign, Ian.
This is not easy to answer, in fact, because
Oh, shit.
because when I was born on April the 20th, 1943, my star sign was Aries, the Ram. But I have noticed that April the 20th has now become Taurus, the Bull. So if I attempt to look at a horoscope in a newspaper, which does not happen very often, I find myself forced to decide whether I am Aries or whether I am a Ram or a Bull. Now, I think that I should remain a Ram, because the whole point about star signs is surely that you are influenced at the moment of your birth, so they cannot change during your life. Yet, however, now I find myself listed as a Bull.
Have you ever been asked to write actually horoscopes?
No, I have not. I just write short biographies that go with stories that are published, such as biographies of you, for example.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, which vary a lot from...
Actually, I learned a lot about my own life by reading my own biography written by you.
This is good.
So please write more, because my life is empty in my memories without your biography.
I could, in fact, include your star sign, which will probably also change. What was yours?
Well, mine's supposed to be Taurus.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now yours was Taurus from the beginning, so is it still Taurus?
Oh, I never checked.
Well, the thing is, we might be the same star sign now, officially. Two bulls. Or we might not be.
And and Ian, another very, very banal question actually. Why were you born?
Well, this was a big accident, in fact, because you will know that there are many sperms.
Yes, I've seen some.
Yeah. Well, through a microscope or on your hand or...
in a lot of places.
In a lot of places, yeah. So there are at least 2 million sperms that are all fighting for the prize of being born. In fact, some of them are just sacrifice sperms because they have bad tails. And I think that their purpose is to counteract the secretions,
These are kamikazes.
Yeah, they're kamikaze.
Suicide sperms.
Yeah, to allow the stronger sperms to get
terrorist sperms.
Terrorist sperms, Al-Qaeda sperms.
Yeah.
But certainly there should be at least 100,000 candidates for being born.
I think there are more actually. We're speaking about millions.
Oh yes, I know, but a lot of them are not viable. They're not. They're deformed and they're not good sperms. They are.
It's just there to confuse the enemy defenses.
Yeah, to confuse the enemy defenses. And I don't know whether they the main competitors, the strong competitors, are. Actually, some of the strong competitors are not much good because they have inherited genetic defects. So I don't know if this is a problem. It's probably not a problem if you're an Olympic swimmer, for example, because even if you have a genetic tendency to die of a heart attack at the age of 70, this does not matter for your success in arriving at the egg.
So you probably had a genetic defect that made you become a science fiction writer.
I
Because
think
there are
so.
very few science fiction writers, so it cannot be the norm. It cannot be normal.
No, it's definitely, yeah, it is a genetic defect, but
Was it very painful?
what, penetrating the egg?
Well, yes, the whole process, you know.
You have to bang your head into the concrete of the egg.
So you have to penetrate with your head. You can't
Oh,
just...
with your head? No, it has to be with the head. And then of course your head breaks open and fuses with and that is quite painful also.
That's also quite pornographic. Actually.
Well, also I have written a pornography novel which
Yes, it is.
of an erotic satire,
Which actually speaks about this moment of beginning of life. In a way.
Yeah.
The orgasm machine.
Yeah, orgasm machine. Yeah. And of course the beloved of. My beloved,
which is also my beloved.
Which is your beloved also, contains a certain amount of erotic anti-eroticism. Yes. So we have hardly got to the moment of my conception as yet.
Well, this is a very well developed biography. I mean, we are not missing any detail.
Yes.
Do you have any memories about your fellow sperms, those who didn't make it?
I don't, but I expect that memories will start to arise now that this has been mentioned.
So you've never tried to contact them in a spiritual...
No. Well, it is possible that all the characters in my novels are actually the lives of the sperms which did not survive.
So actually writers are the only one who actually tribute something in life to the fellow sperms.
Yeah, now this is
by developing their own personality in the books where they actually can exist, they have a chance to exist.
I think this is true. In fact, this is an example of altruism. You know that an animal might sacrifice itself so that its cousin can survive and carry on part of its genetics. So it is equally possible that writer sperms have a collective advantage because they know that because the other sperms know that if the writer sperm arrives at the egg, it will actually produce echoes and avatars of the failed sperms.
So there is actually, you have a lot of sperm, for example, hooligan sperm that was surrounding you probably because of statistical laws.
Yeah.
There were football fans sperm.
Oh no! In my case, I don't think any football fan sperm. No. Possibly cricket sperm.
Cricket sperm.
Yeah. So there would be a kind of field, an energy field, whereby the other sperms felt that part of their potential would continue into the future if they supported me in the swim. And if they did not, then they would be faced with oblivion. So it is like Pascal's wager about the existence of God, which I think means it is safer to believe in the existence of God rather than not, when you die. Uniquely, the other sperms were willing to sacrifice themselves because they had, let us say, a 1% chance of surviving into the future by letting me win. Whereas if they did not make this choice, they would have a 1 in 200 million chance of success versus the certainty of oblivion. So possibly my birth under the sign of Aries was not such an accident after all. It was less accidental than most people's conception.
Well, you have been actually very generous towards your sperm. I know about people who actually spill their own sperm in order to make pancakes, which then they serve to their friends without telling them how they did them. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Did they tell them afterwards?
Well, it depends to whom they cook this, because probably in some cases it's not really convenient for them to tell. And they just then mock them while talking with other people.
Well, this has not happened to me.
This is not very polite to your own sperm.
As far as I'm aware.
Well, it's not really your own fetal sperm because actually this is the sperm that you produce and not the one in which you were contained in the beginning.
Of course. So
you're just making jokes with sperm. So beyond sperm, what happened in your life? In 2 words.
Fetal development first. It must know, and then birth.
Okay, what was it? Was it? Did you film it? Did somebody film your birth?
No, this method of being born had not yet been conceived or invented. But I was born far from where I was brought up, because my father was listening to enemy broadcasts in a radio station near St Albans, where later I was to work with Stanley Kubrick.
But actually, so there were absolutely no image of you before your birth. I mean, there are no images taken with ancient dildo cams.
No. They did not have these things. Also, it was during the Second World War. So everything had to be melted down in order to make battleships and guns.
So all the dildo cams probably were
melted. They would have been
bombs.
Yeah. The railings, the iron railings from around all churchyards and people's houses as well were all removed. Now they were actually of no use. The metal was wrong, but it was felt that everyone would be a contributor to the war effort against the Nazis if they sacrificed the railings around their gardens and the railings around churchyards. And what actually happened was that at huge expense and manpower, all of the metal from around gardens and churchyards was collected, and then it was driven to Scotland and dumped in a mountain because it was of no use in reality.
I trust you.
Well, it is true. The thing is, I want to know where the mountain of Second World War railings is in Scotland, because it should be a site worth visiting.
Which actually are your first memories? The one that you are aware of?
My first memory is of a line of trees, rather like in a painting by Sisley of poplars or willows. The tall things. I think it is poplars. Because I was lying in a pram, and there was a suggestion of clouds and one aeroplane in the sky, which could have been a Nazi attack plane, but probably not during the day.
Yeah, it would be quite amazing. I think if your first memory would be a Nazi plane.
Yes, but I mean, the first memory of many Germans would be a Nazi plane.
Yeah, yes, I believe that. Yeah,
and also probably
not nowadays.
Cardinal Ratzinger's first memory.
A Nazi plane. When he was born. When was he born? No, I think he was born earlier.
Yes. In that case, it would be a First World War plane, the Red Baron. It is possible that Cardinal Ratzinger saw the Red Baron fly over his pram.
Oh, it's a fascinating thought. He was not cardinal at that time.
Well, no, okay then. Pre-cardinal.
Pre-pope.
Pre-pope Ratzinger looked out of his pram.
Yeah. Do you think it would be possible to distinguish future writer sperm from future pope sperm? I mean, if you could isolate that particular sperm and actually replicate it in order to have enough quantity, and then
this will be possible with the super science of the future.
It will be possible.
But the easier way would be to design one super sperm with all the characteristics you want, and then to throw it into the pool of sperm. Because it would proceed, it would triumph. It would be an Übersperm.
Ein Übersperm. This high intellectual, philosophical concept. Everything which is in German is either philosophical
or something else.
Yes. Well, actually, why do you think there are on one side you have science fiction writers.
Why? What is your first memory?
My first memory is actually that I was trapped in like a kind of bondage.
Yes.
Actually, my first memories of bondage. I had the BDSM experience when I was very, very little. And it consisted in being bondaged with a tool that allowed parents, to pull you like a puppet master.
Yeah.
So that actually you can have the simulation of walking while actually not really walking because puppet master were maneuvering you. So I remember me trying, to go somewhere and being frustrated because actually puppet master
operating
me
to go in the, this probably had
it was very fascinating memory actually, but and I was it was very clear consciousness of all that. I found it very outrageous, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely, an assault upon your dignity.
Yes.
Yes. Well, my memory of the pram would be sometime before I was 2.
Yeah, well, this happened to me probably before I was 2, probably when I was around 1. This is my first memory, and it's very vague. Actually, a few others, but this is the most. It was one of the most interesting. So I actually have very early.
I remember that we decided
we
to
did,
have
we
some
did, we
water
did.
with this interview because the water is behind our backs and we do not have arms in our backs.
Yes, and it's also liquid, which is
reflective. Oh,
yes, it's okay. Yeah, in the 60s we didn't have Nazi planes over our heads, so I couldn't see them because I was born in that decade, which is a beautiful decade for those who were born before.
Precisely, but not for those people who were born during the 60s because they missed it.
Yeah, I didn't really notice the 60s.
I did notice them from Japan, where I got a sort of distorted kaleidoscopic view through Japanese eyes of what was happening in my own country, which might have been more fun than actually living in my own country and observing it undistorted.
Well, I had my own distortion because actually I went to a German school in Italy, so I would have teachers, Italian teachers and German teachers in alternate years telling me the history from the respective points of view. So I didn't really understand very much because, of course, we had some wars between Italy and Germany at one point, so vision of history was slightly different when told by different.
But this is good. It gives you a different perspective.
Oh yes. So now I'm very elastic and I'm very confused about the history, which is good. I think everybody should be confused about history. This is the only way to truth.
Well, I had to learn a lot about the French Revolution.
Because you're English?
Yes.
I understand.
We learned nothing about the English Revolution, which happened 2 centuries earlier.
And why? How did you end up in Japan, actually?
This was after I did a research degree in English and French literature at Oxford. The first place that employed me was the University of East Africa, which was called the University of Tanzania then.
And this is not in Japan, right?
No, Tanzania is not in Japan. And I got to...
has never been in Japan?
No, but I think in one of the stories in The Beloved, countries move around.
Yeah, it was in...
No, it is in Paradoxina.
It is in Paradoxina.
I just remembered that now, which was a very interesting concept, that countries can switch locations on
Yes,
on
in
Earth.
my book Paradoxine, that people could even find in some very rare shop.
But yes, or they could obtain it from imanianpress.com.
Yes, we didn't want to make any publicity.
No.
So you were in Japan, which is... no, you were first in Africa, which was not Japan yet.
It was not even Chinese. It has become quite Chinese because in recent years because of the economic power of China. They were trying to get rid of me from Oxford by sending me to the former colonies because they suspected that I was...
Yes, once it was called exile.
Yes. Exile with a certain... Yeah, it is the same way that a younger son who had done something wrong would be sent to India in the 19th century.
And other people who did even more wrong things would send to Australia, I suppose.
Oh, yes. I'm glad I was not sent to Australia.
Yeah, also the accent would have been spoiled.
Spoiled, completely spoiled. And
So
yeah,
you were in Africa?
yeah, so I was in Africa. Because I met in Oxford, I was introduced to the professor in charge of the university and in charge of English at the university in Dar es Salaam, in charge of literature, that is to say, who I thought was Indian until I met her. Her name was Molly Mahood. And Mahood sounded like Mahout, the person who rides upon an elephant to guide it. But actually, it is an Irish name. So she was from she was English from Ireland. Yeah, so I was there for a time. I did not do very much work because they hired too many people. So in the first year, I only had one class a week and spent the rest of the time at the beach.
I think this is a very wise approach.
Yeah, and also reading things,
Mhm.
such as Elias Canetti, for example.
Yes, I know.
Well,
And then suddenly you were deported to Japan.
well, no, I came back to England because it was very boring living in Tanzania, in fact.
Oh, really?
Well, yes, if you don't have a lot of money to go and drive a long way and see animals, and I did drive a bit and see animals, but if you don't have a lot of money, it becomes a bit boring, the limitations after a time. I mean, culturally it was a little bit, I would not like to say backward because that would make people angry, but let me just say that the people in East Africa were talking about West African cultural imperialism, because the West Africa, Nigeria, Senegal, etc., were so rich in writers, artists, that they completely cast into the shade anything that was being produced in East Africa.
This still does not tell us how you were delivered to Japan.
No, it does not. No, so I left East Africa largely because of boredom, by way of Cairo, and a couple of weeks after I left Cairo, an Arab-Israeli war broke out. And then I stopped.
But this was not your fault.
No, it was not my fault. However, I then stopped in Athens, and 2 days after I left, the right-wing military colonels had a military coup and took over.
And this was your fault.
Yeah, well, there was a sequence of events beginning to accumulate.
Yes, we should always beware of sequences of events, because actually these are a kind of geometry of time, when Euclidean geometry of time actually can provide mysterious consequences.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, yes.
You're good, really. I don't know what I said.
Well, it just sounded very rational. So then I lived in Oxford for about 6 months until I realised that I was spending the money that I had, the little bit of money I had saved in East Africa, and I must apply for another job. So I applied because I had been in Africa before. I applied for a job in Cameroons,
which is in Japan, right?
No, it is in West Africa.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, I was prepared to go to Cameroons because I read a popular travel zoology book by Gerald Durrell, which was set in Cameroons, and I went for an interview, and during the interview they said to me, we actually would like somebody with brain damage to go to the Cameroons, because then they won't realise how boring and banal it is. And if you would like to come back for an interview for central Tokyo next month, then we think this is a better idea for you, really. So I took their advice, and it was Tokyo rather than the Cameroons.
It should be some difference, I suppose.
Okay, yeah,
Tokyo is different than Cameroon.
Yeah. I noticed that they all spoke Japanese, for instance.
Well, that's something.
Including the ones who were trying to speak English, such as the professors of English. And then there were about 14 million of them in Tokyo itself. And it was a time it was the psychedelic age, and also it was a time of ultra pollution. The cherry trees were dying from pollution, so that they had plasma drips attached to the stems to keep the trees alive. And news items in the newspapers 20,000 teachers have pollution growths on their vocal cords, mercury poisoning kills.
This
lots
sounds
of
all
people.
very attractive, actually. What did you write in that period? Did you write something that's...
I read some slightly mainstream stories, and then I started to write science fiction as a kind of psychological survival mechanism.
And I think it happens to a lot of science fiction writers, actually.
Yeah. Well, you could not also not mention to the Japanese that the Tokyo at the time, not now, was intensely polluted. I remember one day somebody said to me, "How do you enjoy Japan?" And so I gave the usual 3 minutes of extreme praise of the country, and at the very end I said, "But in Tokyo the air is a bit polluted." So this man sucked in his breath and became red in the face and replied, "I hear the pound is sick today." I committed a national insult.
And then, speaking about national insults, Japanese known to have a very bizarre sexual hobbies. Was it already like that at that time?
Yes. I used to buy a magazine of knots because it was funny. This was how to tie people up, and it came out every month, and it was about 200 pages, filled with photographs of the most complicated rope work, so that the flesh extruded like 18 breasts, even though it was just the ordinary flesh of the body.
Yes, now with the internet, all this culture is spreading all around the world, and it's becoming common treasure of every people.
Yeah.
And other things, did they already sell second-hand lingerie in the automatic boxes? Like
you did not have automatic dispensers.
True.
That is the problem. No, and well, I was not aware that they were selling schoolgirls used underwear. It is possible that they were, but I don't think actually they were.
Okay, we've spoken enough about Japan.
Yes.
Which other places do exist in your point of view, according to your experience? Because we know that places are just in our mind.
Well, this is true.
Most of the people has not been most of the places, and so.
Well, the whole of the Pacific Ocean, but only one.
And nobody speaks ever about the Pacific Ocean.
Well, they don't, because there is not much in it.
Well, there isn't much in it, but actually we have no relation with that. I suppose the fish wouldn't agree.
I had a relation with it for 2.5 weeks on a Hapag-Lloyd, a container ship, which the last one ever to take passengers, 12 passengers only, non-stop from Kobe to Panama. This was a very strange experience. I never wish to see the Pacific Ocean again. And it is very surreal. I read a story about it. I don't want to tell all the anecdotes, except that to mention that two stupid British people had decided, middle-aged, had decided to spend their money on a round-the-world voyage, even though the ship was stopping hardly anywhere, because it wanted to go as fast as possible. So out of boredom they had begun to pretend that they were prisoners of war of the German crew. And the German captain and chief engineer had started to play this game as well. So we entered a very peculiar mind game in Kobe when we got on board.
Well, that sounds very interesting. We should perhaps do a replica economically to offer this as a kind of reality game, role play game.
Well, yes,
and become very rich with that.
We could do. Well, the food was all tasteless completely because it was loaded, frozen at Hamburg, and then defrosted and heated. But you had to eat it because the few passengers were at the captain's table, and he would call out, What flesh is this? Bring more flesh. And you had to eat it because even if it had no taste, because every Sunday morning the passengers had to go on deck and they were then weighed. There was a hook put up and a sling that you would sit in to weigh you. And the captain would call out your weight from the previous Sunday and your weight now. And if you had gained weight, then the crew would all applaud and shout, hooray! And if you had lost weight, they would go, boo! The captain's excuse for this ceremony was that he was supposed to declare the exact weight of the ship when you arrived at Panama because of the canal, but that he was not telling the truth. The heroine of this weight-gaining campaign was in fact the German wife of a brewery manager who came on board in Panama. And that evening there was excitement at the captain's table because she was a big woman. And the captain said, you are a big woman. How much weight has your man? And she said something like, oh, my man has 500 kilo. And everybody applauded and shouted, bring more flesh. And so we went through the Panama Canal and came out into the Sargasso Sea, where the mats of weed were. However, the Sargasso Sea is not always flat and still. There are rollers in the Sargasso Sea. So the brewery manager's wife, in the early morning, came out dressed in a black bikini and gold lame high heels, and said to me, "Sport is good." And then she started to do calisthenics on the deck, and we hit the first of the rolling waves of the Sargasso Sea, and she fell over onto her large bottom, and she never came on deck again dressed in a black bikini and gold lame high heels to do sport.
I think this is I don't think.
You don't think?
No, I was listening,
Yeah,
so
that
stop
means,
thinking.
That means, according to Descartes, that you do not exist.
Oh, right, this is a beautiful experience I would suggest to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
because the only other moment in which you can experience that is after dying, and then it's difficult to remember it.
Yeah, because you cannot experience it before being born.
Well, a lot of people pretend they do, yes, but
Well,
I
they
think
do.
I suppose that this is not really true.
I think it's unlikely because the statistical accident of your conception has not yet happened, and there are multiple options before you are born, but after you die there is only one possibility, the one which was actualized by your conception and life.
I suppose you're right. I didn't really understand, because
Oh.
I have now big flashes in of void in my mind.
Well, shall I explain again?
Oh no, because
No,
people listening to us are more
they-
intelligent than me.
They will understand, yes.
And if they are not, they can rewind and listen back.
Yeah. So when did you discover places other than Italy?
Okay, I think that now the
It is flashing.
Yeah, it's flashing. So actually we have a few seconds, but then I can put another card and
Oh,
we
yeah,
can
yeah,
continue. This was one of the things that was keeping me a little. So
okay.
I will cut this last few
no
seconds or not,
Yeah.
because any moment it should stop.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Well, actually, I can stop it.
Well, the most important thing I know is.
Now that some real ale has been added to the situation, we can go on. Yes, but you should stay more in front.
I should. Yes. Sorry, I stopped making cigarettes. Now this is an important discipline which maintains body posture and flexibility of the fingers.
You can continue to make the last cigarette again and again to roll it. So we have been talking very interesting things in the moment that the camera went off. So now we have to pretend the camera is still off and eventually go on with interesting discussions about nothingness and.
Well, nothingness is interesting because logically it would seem that existence is less likely than nothingness.
It's far less likely. I mean,
Well, but however, I have been reading scientific papers which suggest that existence is necessary and unavoidable.
these are human words.
Well, they are, but I think there are the mystic symbols of mathematics to back this up.
As you said, mystic. The problem is that the epistemological problem of the fact that all this wisdom and knowledge is processed through our brains. So actually there is this fundamental instrumental mistake that our brains are coming to the conclusions and they are putting them in these words which actually means nothing on that kind of real plane.
Yes.
So actually, why do things exist? This is a real issue. I mean,
But
why they could so much easily not exist?
Well, things fall into two different categories. There is an ecosystem like the Earth. How is it possible that there is an inhabitable planet with complex life on it versus the existence of universes? Well, it seems that the existence of universes is possibly fundamental, that this has always been so and always will be so, that universes will continue to produce other universes, and that there was never a moment when nothing existed.
I completely agree on that, and I personally think that the whole Big Bang theory is just a completely nonsense.
Oh, no, you can have a Big Bang, but
not the Big Bang.
Not the only Big Bang.
Yeah, exactly.
You can have many Big Bangs, all the time.
And of course, the Big Bang is not what we are supposing it to be, because it makes really no sense. Because supposing a beginning of a time doesn't really make real sense.
So it would seem that universes generate universes.
This would make
Generate
sense.
many possible universes with a wide range of different physical constants. So some will be completely uninhabitable by any form of anything, and others will be habitable. And as there is an infinite number, therefore the fact that we have a habitable universe is not surprising in the slightest.
There's the anthropic principle. So actually, we just notice it because if we were in another one, we couldn't notice it.
Yeah, there are now hints that we might be able to discover something about adjacent universes, maybe perhaps.
Which kind of universe?
Adjacent ones which are next to us.
Adjacent.
Yeah. Possibly. The question of life, of actually intelligent life, or life which thinks it is intelligent, is different. I read a book called Rare Earth, for instance, which sets out the number of accidents which were required for any complex life to be on this planet, let alone ourselves. And that there are all sorts of conditions which occurred by sheer chance. For instance, a planet the size of Mars smashing into the Earth and causing the Moon to appear, to come into existence. And that is only just one of them. When you think of that, the statistical accident of our planet being winning the lottery again and again and again and again suggests that the majority of planets in the galaxy or even in the universe may not win the lottery, or they might win it for 7 times, but they don't win it the 8th time.
Yes, but this would anyway make very little sense, because if life exists, this means that it's in the nature of the universe to produce life.
Oh, it is in the nature of the universe.
It doesn't really explain why the nature of the universe should imply that life is so rare. It is rare.
Life in itself might not be rare, but it might only get to the stage of bacteria.
Or perhaps there are other kinds of life we are completely unaware.
Yeah,
actually, if you just think about the intelligence of the species, because the whole Darwinian way to explain evolution is incomplete, because actually, if you consider the species deeply, you see that there are strategies that the species implement in order to achieve goals. If you think just at the shape that some flowers have to attract specific insects, to do interspecific sex. It's completely because actually these insects are convinced actually to find genitals of other insects. So actually the whole stuff is simply so unlikely to happen by complete chance that without using the horrible words of intelligent design, I would just say that there is clearly an intelligence of the species themselves.
Well, there is emergent, there are emergent properties, emergent complexity.
Yes, which we cannot actually describe properly.
No.
Because we cannot understand how is it possible that trees have intelligent strategies in the millions of years, if you think about that. So actually, it's because the time frame and the time scale is very, very large. So actually, so in a way, we could say that there are alien forms of life on our own planet which we are completely unaware of. Because if the species are intelligent in themselves and they do strategies, there is no individual and there is not even a time moment. There is only a time span which is very wide, and we don't see this intelligent form as intelligent.
We only realized very recently that there are not just two kingdoms of life, animals and plants. There are three. The third one is the fungi.
Yes.
Yeah. So we only realized that about 20 years ago. So what else is there we have not noticed before we can make it extinct? Yeah.
I was too wise for a few minutes, so now I have no idea left.
Yes, the ideas that we had during the silence were remarkable and profound. Yes. So when did you start to worry first about the nature of life?
Yes, and actually, when I was a little child, I think that the best awareness, consciousness about death and infinite spaces and time spans, I had it when I was a child. Because now, all what I know about these categories, even though it's more complex than when at that time, it is polluted by the metaphors that we project, continuously. So that actually now, if I think of death, actually immediately metaphors step in, and actually you don't really get to the real thing, to the real implications. But when I was a child, this was very intuitive. So actually I was aware in a completely non-linguistic way, which was completely scaring and horrible and profound and fundamentally true at the same time. I don't think that I have the same degree of truthness now where I could talk about that for hours. Well, at that time I could say nothing, but I was aware, so it's basically very fascinating. Actually, I'm speaking about another creature because...
Well, yes, we were all other creatures previously.
Yes, I think we may even be other creatures compared to the first part of this conversation.
Yeah, I remember when I first really felt death. I was in my parents' kitchen, and I suddenly realized my mother would die. I mean, not immediately, but I knew that she would die, and this had a big effect upon me.
Yeah, I don't remember when I realized that other people would die. I remember when I realized that I would die.
Yes, when I had my only medical intervention, which did not involve cutting me open, the anaesthetic, in fact, the experience, the non-experience of the anaesthetic was quite interesting, that I just ceased to exist completely and then re-existed.
If I knew it, I could have tried to phone you to see if you would answer in that period. Probably I would be able to confirm that you didn't exist at all. And actually your telephoning answering machine could answer, Ian Watson has ceased to exist for the moment. Please try it later to see if he starts again.
Yeah. The strange thing is that later on, a memory came back of awakening during my unexistence. While the doctors were, I appeared to be distressed, or they thought so. In my memory, they were recommending something and doing something to undistress me. But I was not aware in the memory of any physical discomfort.
So no out of the body experience.
No, there was no out of
you
the
didn't
body.
watch, something from outside.
No,
Maybe somebody having sex in the
no,
room nearby.
No, in this memory, the two doctors were looking at me and saying something to me, and I was replying something. But this is a sort of not a non-me, and then I picked up the memory later on, but it is a partial memory. And I did not remember that when I re-existed. It only returned to me. So it may have been. Then I read my hospital notes, and this confirmed that while in the recovery room, I had experienced something unpleasant.
This leads also to an interesting legal and moral problem, because when you are not you during total anesthesia, actually, if somebody would abuse of your body, having, for example, sex with your body, or would it a real abuse or not? I mean, if you are not there, if you are actually completely absent because you're not even sleeping, you really cease to exist, Is it actually only a kind of abuse of your body or of the person? The person is not there, so how can it be abused? It's an interesting problem.
Well, it is.
I mean, the law can be always wrong, but from the moral point of view, from the religious point of view, is it a crime or not?
Well, likewise, is necrophilia wrong?
Well, there was a very interesting case in Romania years ago, where there was a necrophile who actually was exercising his hobby, while actually one of the victims awoke. And actually it was a case of apparent death. It was a young lady, and actually she was very soon going to be buried. So actually the fact that
he saved her life.
He saved her life through necrophilia. And
was she grateful?
This is the question that was not answered in the news that I read, because virtually he committed a crime of necrophilia, which was not a crime because actually she was not dead. So it should be rape instead. But how could he rape someone if he was thinking that she's dead? Because actually it's an involuntary rape, because of course if you think that the person is dead, you are not raping her. It's necrophilia, clearly.
Yes.
So which was the crime? Rape or necrophilia? On the other side, he saved her life.
By accident?
By accident. And anyway, it doesn't matter if by accident he saved her life. So actually she would be dead if he didn't commit necrophilia or rape towards her. So how should it be judged? That's an interesting question. Nobody has answered to that.
There is an article in New Scientist about that, because if you in people whose brains malfunction a bit, so that they are unaware, not quite aware of the differences between good and evil, they will rate accidentally killing somebody as being as being more evil than attempting to kill them but failing. Whereas ordinary people with all of their brain operating would certainly classify attempting to kill somebody and failing as being more evil because of intention than accidentally killing somebody. And interestingly, if you disable this portion of the brain in normal volunteers, they will then change their judgments likewise, so that the intention to kill is less important than the actual death, accidental death. So scientific investigation of this ethical problem is continuing.
And needed to know result.
It will lead to strange
controversy.
Especially in courts of law.
So that and in courts it's very unlikely that actually this will be established for real, because how big the gap is between justice and what actually effectively happens in the courts of law.
Yes, so you were afflicted by this while a child. Did Nietzsche help you?
Well, he was dead by that time, but So actually he couldn't help me, and he was dead because I think he got syphilis in my town.
Yeah.
In my town, actually.
In your town?
I think so. Well, actually,
I know that he went to Staglieno Cemetery to visit it and was affected by it.
by syphilis there.
So he got the syphilis in Staglieno Cemetery.
Well, nobody can tell probably. He was for a while in Genova, in Rapallo, and I think that the time for the interview is going close. We should probably apologize for not having been banal enough.
Yes.
Yeah, nobody's perfect.
Yeah, well.
And on the other side, actually, we could also, since this is supposed to be a kind of banal interview, we should supposed to say that actually Ian Watson has written tens and tens of books, probably 60 or 50. Or,
I do not count.
very many, a lot of kilos. How many kilos?
Or
should it depends. In yards?
Yards. Well, it depends if you count all of the editions, including the translations. Let me see, about 20 meters.
20 meters.
I think it's something like that.
That's not bad. 20 meters of book. Well, you need a big apartment.
Yes.
So not everybody can afford to be a reader. To read all your books.
But
to collect them.
I'm talking about all of the editions and translations, and maybe it is less than 20 meters. Maybe it is 15 meters.
Yeah, 50 meters